There's a hope that's waiting for you in the dark. You should know you're beautiful just the way you are. You don't have to change a thing, the world can change its heart. No scars, see you're beautiful. We're stars and we're beautiful.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to Grace and Grit. I'm really glad you're here today. Whether you're listening while folding laundry, driving home, cleaning the kitchen for the second time today, or maybe you're hiding in the bathroom for just 5 minutes of peace, thank you for spending this time with me. Today's conversation is one that I've been sitting with for a couple days because Mother's Day just passed. And I think sometimes we talk so much about the holiday itself that we forget to talk about what comes after. We see the post, the flowers, the brunches, the matching family outfits, the gift baskets, the smiling social media posts, the family photos. But nobody talks about Monday morning. Nobody really talks about the emotional drop that can happen afterwards, or the quiet disappointment that some mothers carry when the day didn't feel the way they hoped it would. And honestly, Mother's Day can bring up so many emotions all at once. We feel joy, gratitude, but we also feel pressure, loneliness, all mixed in with love, exhaustion, grief, comparison, all in the same day. And I wanted today to simply be a safe conversation. Not polished, not perfect, no pretending, just honest. Because I think mothers spend so much of their lives taking care of everyone else that very few people pause long enough to care for them emotionally or in the same way with the same effort that we give everyone around us. Oh, people celebrate moms, but they don't always see moms. And there's a difference there, a big one. Because being seen means that someone notices the invisible things too. The mental load, the emotional labor, the constant responsibility, the pressure to hold everything together. Being seen means someone notices the exhaustion behind the smile, the strength behind the patience, and the sacrifice behind the routines. And maybe today, that's what I want this episode to be. A reminder that you are seen, not just on Mother's Day, but afterwards too, especially afterward. Because once the holiday ends, real life keeps moving. The dishes still need to be washed, lunch is packed, and the bills definitely keep coming. The kids still need help with homework. Your toddler still wakes up at 2 a.m. That teenager still needs advice. And the family still depends on you. And sometimes there's this strange emotional transition that happens. And it's quick. One day you're being celebrated, and the next day you're right back to carrying everything again. And Nobody says thank you on Tuesday. Maybe nobody even notices your exhaustion by Wednesday. And by Thursday, you're already questioning yourself again, wondering if you're doing enough, if you're failing, why motherhood can feel so rewarding and so draining at the same time. And if you felt that, I want you to know you're not alone, not even a little bit. Because I think so many mothers quietly carry these feelings, but we rarely say them out loud. There's almost this pressure to always appear grateful, fulfilled, and strong. And yes, motherhood can be absolutely beautiful, but it's also incredibly hard. And both of these things can be true. You can deeply love your children and be exhausted. You can deeply love your husband and question your decisions every day. You can feel grateful and still be overwhelmed. You can cherish motherhood and still miss womanhood. You can still miss yourself. You can love your family, but still need rest and a break from them. That doesn't make you selfish. That makes you human. And honestly, I think more moms need permission to say that out loud. Somewhere along the way, many of us started believing that struggling means we're failing. But that's not true. Struggling does not mean you're failing. Being tired doesn't mean you're a bad mom. Needing support does not mean you're weak. And having complicated feelings about Mother's Day does not make you ungrateful. It makes you real. So today, we're going to talk about it. All of it. The beautiful parts, the painful parts, the ordinary parts, the disappointing parts. And most importantly, we're going to talk about your worth outside of that one single holiday. Because your value was never supposed to be measured by one Sunday in May. Your value exists in quiet moments that nobody sees. And I hope by the end of this episode, you truly feel that. So, grab your coffee or whatever you're drinking in that cup, and let's talk. I think one of the strangest things about Mother's Day is how quickly it's over. One minute, people are posting tributes, writing long captions about how much moms mean to them. And then less than 24 hours, everything goes back to normal. The kitchen's messy again, the laundry piles return, the schedules start back up, the errands continue. And moms quietly step back into the background of everyone else's needs. And I don't think people always realize how emotionally jarring that can feel, especially when mothers spend so much of their lives pouring out emotional, mental, and physical strengths and just miracles every single day. Because motherhood isn't just physical work, it's mental work, it's emotional work, it's invisible. It's remembering the appointments, the allergies, shoe sizes, the ever-changing shoe sizes, spirit week, dress up week, who likes what food today, who's struggling emotionally, remembering what everyone else needs before they ask. And honestly, that is exhausting. Even when you love your family deeply. And sometimes motherhood, no, Mother's Day becomes this one moment where mothers hope to feel appreciated. We're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for grand acts and shows of love. We are literally just looking for appreciation. And when that appreciation, when we get it, fades immediately after, it can feel heavier than the load you were carrying before. Not because moms expect constant praise, but because everyone wants to feel seen sometimes. Everyone wants to feel valued. Everyone wants to know that their efforts matter. Many of us mothers quietly wonder, if I stopped holding everything together, would anyone even notice how much I do? That thought alone says how heavy the load can become. Because many moms have become so dependable that people start expecting the sacrifice instead of appreciating it. And over time, that can slowly wear down even the strongest woman, especially when she feels like she has to keep smiling through it all. What makes this even harder is that mothers don't feel like they're allowed to talk about it. Not honestly. Because the second a mom admits she's overwhelmed, someone will be there and rush to remind her, be grateful. And yes, gratitude matters. But gratitude and exhaustion, they can live together. I've already said it. You can love your children with your whole heart and still feel emotionally drained. You can be blessed, and still feel burned out. These things are not opposites. They're part of being human. And I think a lot of moms needed to hear that long before today. Because somewhere along the way, many of us learned to minimize our own needs, push through, keep going. We carry way more than we should. And eventually, we stop asking for help altogether because we assume nobody understands anyway. Nope, nobody's going to truly want to help. So we adapt. We become strong, capable, reliable. We become the one everyone depends on. But strong women get tired too. And the hardest part isn't even the physical exhaustion. It's the emotional loneliness that can come with constantly caring for everyone else while quietly neglecting yourself. It's feeling needed all the time, but rarely nurtured. Surrounded by people, oh yes, but feeling emotionally unseen, invisible. And honestly, Mother's Day, sometimes it simply intensifies those feelings. Because when the holiday ends, some mothers are left sitting with a reality that they can't ignore anymore. Maybe the day felt rushed. Maybe nobody helped. Maybe nobody noticed what would have made you feel loved. Maybe you smiled through the disappointment so that no one else would feel uncomfortable. And if that happened this year for you, your disappointment does not make you selfish. Your feelings are valid. Mothers spend so much time protecting everyone else's emotions that they never acknowledge their own. But your emotional needs matter too, not just everyone else's, yours too. And I think one of the most healing things a mother can learn is that you don't have to earn rest. You do not have to completely fall apart before you're allowed to slow down. You do not have to prove you're exhausted to deserve care. And you're allowed to need support before you reach a burnout. You're allowed to be human before you break. Maybe this is the part nobody talks about enough. A lot of mothers are running on empty, but we're pretending we're fine. It's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. We've mastered functioning while exhausted, smiling while overwhelmed, showing up while emotionally depleted. And because we keep managing everything, people just assume we're okay. But surviving and thriving, they are not the same thing. And some moms have been surviving for a very long time. Quietly, faithfully, silently, without recognition or enough rest, and without enough emotional support. Maybe that's why the days after Mother's Day can feel unexpectedly emotional. Because once the flowers start fading, real feelings rise to the surface again. The fatigue, the loneliness, the pressure, the questions, the self-doubt, wondering if anyone truly understands you. Maybe you've had moments where you thought, I shouldn't feel this way. Feelings aren't failures. Those are signals. Signals that maybe you've been carrying too much for too long. And that's a signal that you need some care too. You've spent so much time nurturing everyone else that you forgot you also need nurturing. And I know that for many mothers, self-care feels absolutely impossible. Not because we don't want it, but because life is demanding and there is always something that needs attention, someone who needs help, another responsibility. And when moms finally do get a quiet moment, we feel guilty for taking it. Guilt for rest, saying no, needing space. But that's not laziness. It's a necessity. Remember, even Jesus rested. And if you're constantly pouring from an empty cup, eventually something inside of you is going to start breaking down. Emotionally, mentally, physically. And quite simply, I think many of us are far more exhausted than we would ever allow ourselves to admit. We're not weak. We're just exhausted. There's a difference. Weakness says, I can't handle anything. Exhaustion says, I've been holding and handling too much for too long. We often normalize the level of stress that we were never meant to carry. It's not normal. The constant overstimulation, responsibility, pressure, the noise, emotional labor. And then we wonder why we feel emotionally numb sometimes. We feel overstimulated when small things would just suddenly make us cry. We feel touched out, mentally foggy, emotionally disconnected. That doesn't mean you're failing. Sometimes it's just simply you're depleted. And depletion changes people. That's why care matters. That's why support matters. That's why appreciation matters. not performative appreciation once a year. Real appreciation, consistent appreciation. The kind that notices the everyday sacrifices. Because motherhood is built in ordinary moments, not just holidays or photos or celebrations. The real work of motherhood happens in the unseen places. The late nights, early mornings, car rides, doctor's appointments, homework help, financial stress, comforting children through heartbreak, holding families together during difficult seasons, and managing chaos while trying not to emotionally collapse. That work matters, even when no one applauds it, even when no one posts about it, even when it feels repetitive and invisible. I think some of us desperately need permission to believe that ordinary faithfulness still counts. You don't have to create magical Pinterest moments every day to be a good mom. You don't have to look perfectly put together or have endless patience. You don't have to mother exactly like everyone else. Comparison is exhausting and it'll tear you apart. Social media has made motherhood feel like a performance sometimes. Like everyone else is doing it better. Well, they're happier, more organized. They're so much more patient and creative and balanced. Social media rarely shows the full story. That's curated moments. That's where we pushed the mess out of the way and took a good picture. That's not reality. That's not the breakdowns, the anxiety, the exhaustion. That's not the night someone cried after everyone went to sleep. We carry enough pressure already without constantly comparing ourselves to filtered versions of someone else's life. We were never meant to mother exactly like others. Your family doesn't need perfection. They need love, consistency, presence, grace, and sometimes, yes, grit too. Sometimes Mother's Day feels ordinary or worse, disappointing. I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about that because I know that there are mothers listening who carried quiet disappointment this year. Maybe your Mother's Day wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't meaningful. Maybe people said Happy Mother's Day, but you still didn't feel seen. Maybe you smiled through the day while secretly wishing someone would notice what you actually needed. Not expensive gifts, not perfection, just thoughtfulness, effort, care, love. And honestly, sometimes the pain isn't even about what happened. It's about what didn't happen. A call that never came. The appreciation that was never spoken. The help that never showed up. The emotional presence that was missing. And what makes disappointment so difficult is that many of us immediately invalidate our own feelings. And we tell ourselves, at least I got something. At least people tried. I shouldn't complain. Other people have it way worse. And yes, perspective matters. But your feelings do too. Being grateful doesn't mean you're not allowed to feel hurt. And I think a lot of mothers have become experts at swallowing disappointment. They don't want to ruin the mood. We don't want to seem difficult, so we say, it's fine. Even though our heart is saying, that hurt more than I expected. And maybe part of what hurts is this deep longing to feel known, not just appreciated, generally, personally known. Known well enough that someone notices your exhaustion. Known well enough that someone realizes you needed rest more than flowers. Known well enough that someone understands emotional support matters too. Because we don't need grand gestures. We just want someone to truly see us, to notice the weight we carry without needing to explain it. We spend so much time anticipating everyone else's needs. It becomes painful when no one anticipates ours. We notice everything: moods, energy shifts, stress levels, small disappointments, all the needs that go unspoken. And after years of caring for others so attentively, it can feel extremely heartbreaking when that same attentiveness isn't returned, especially on the one day that's supposed to honor motherhood. But I want to remind you of something important. The effort others make towards you does not determine your worth. I know that sounds simple, but it is deeply important. Because when someone forgets you, overlooks you, or fails to appreciate you properly, it's easy to internalize that as, maybe I'm not that important. But someone's inability to honor your value does not erase your value at all. And honestly, people sometimes fail to appreciate what they've become accustomed to. Not because you're unimportant, but because your love remains constant and your support became expected to them. Your sacrifice became normal to them. And while they may explain certain things, it still doesn't mean your efforts are small. You matter deeply, even if people fail to express it well sometimes. Another hard part about Mother's Day is the comparison. Because comparison has a way of turning even decent moments into painful ones. You could have had an okay day until you opened social media, and then you saw the extravagant surprises, beautiful family photos, perfect looking celebrations, long emotional captions, and suddenly your ordinary day feels insufficient. Your quiet day feels lonely. Your reality feels smaller. Comparison, that will steal gratitude and peace faster than anything else does, because you'll start measuring your life against snapshots of the truth. Social media rarely tells the truth. Nobody posts the argument before the family photo. Nobody posts the exhaustion afterwards. And nobody posts the tears behind the smile. And nobody posts the emotional distance that may exist under the appearance of perfection. That's important to remember. I've said it before. We already carry enough without believing that we have to compete with curated images online. You don't need a viral Mother's Day moment to prove you're loved. You don't need expensive gifts to prove that your motherhood matters. And honestly, some of the most extraordinary mothers are living very ordinary looking lives. Quietly, faithfully, without applause, attention, recognition. They're still showing up every single day, still loving their families deeply, still carrying responsibility that nobody else fully sees. That kind of love, it's powerful, even when it's unnoticed, especially when it's unnoticed, because true motherhood was never about performance. It's always been about presence. And I think that there are mothers listening right now who feel emotionally exhausted from trying to meet impossible expectations. The expectation to be patient all the time, gentle, organized, emotionally available all the time, put together all the time. Honestly, that's crushing pressure. No human being can sustain perfection, not emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. And maybe part of healing is finally allowing yourself to be a person again. Not just a provider, not just a caretaker, not just the one everyone depends on, but a whole human with needs, emotions, limits, and struggles too. Many of us disappear inside our own responsibilities. We become so busy taking care of everyone else that we've stopped asking completely, how am I doing? We just ask what still needs to be done. But if we were to ask, how is my heart? How is my mind? How is my soul? And maybe today, that's a question worth sitting with, honestly. Not to shame yourself or criticize yourself. I don't want you to do that. But to reconnect with yourself. Because you still matter. Outside of what you do for other people, you still matter. Outside of productivity, caretaking, and performance, you matter because you are a person worthy of care too. And for many moms, I know that idea feels uncomfortable because we are so used to putting ourselves last. But constantly abandoning ourselves emotionally will eventually create emptiness, resentment, burnout, numbness. I think many of us are functioning in survival mode and we're calling it normal. But survival mode was never meant to be your permanent lifestyle. You deserve peace too, emotional support too, and you deserve kindness. Not just from others, but from yourself. Because some mothers, myself included, speak so harshly to ourselves, more than anyone else ever could. The guilt, self-criticism, and the constant feeling of not doing enough, that's exhausting. Maybe today you just need permission to stop measuring yourself only by what you didn't get done. Because to be quite honest, motherhood is never finished. there will always be more laundry, more dishes, more errands, more responsibility. And if your worth is tied only to completed tasks, you're never going to feel enough because they're never completed. So maybe instead, measure your motherhood by love, faithfulness, presence, by the way your children feel safe with you, and by the way you keep trying, even on the hard days, and how you continue showing up despite exhaustion. Because that matters more than perfection ever will. We've talked about the invisible weight that we carry, our unwanted superpowers. I mean, people tend to notice the visible things: clean house, packed lunches, the rides, the routines, but they don't always see the invisible door underneath it. The constant thinking, worrying, emotional management, decision fatigue, that's real. The mental tabs that never fully close. And honestly, I don't think many mothers ever fully turn their brains off. Even when they're resting physically, our minds are still running. We're still remembering, still planning, still caring. And that kind of mental exhaustion builds, especially when a mother becomes the emotional center of the home. Because we're not only managing tasks, we're managing emotions too. We're helping our children regulate their feelings, helping our spouses through stress, trying to keep peace in our home, and trying to make sure everybody feels loved and cared for all the time. And while we're doing that, we're suppressing our own emotions to avoid becoming one more problem. So we hold it together, even when we're struggling. And that emotional suppression becomes heavy, very heavy. Because carrying everyone else's emotional weight while neglecting yourself, that creates burnout. That's not weakness, that's burnout. And I think mothers deserve a whole lot more compassion than we often receive, because society praises mothers for their sacrifice, but rarely asks how much the sacrifices are costing them. People admire how much moms can handle, but sometimes mothers are handling too much. And being capable doesn't mean something isn't overwhelming. And just because you can carry it doesn't mean it ain't heavy. I think mothers have become so accustomed to functioning under pressure that we don't even recognize how exhausted we truly are anymore. We've normalized survival. We've normalized overstimulation. We've normalized never having quiet, to the point that sometimes quiet feels so uncomfortable that we will make a noise. We normalize constantly being needed. And then we stop recognizing our own depletion because, well, it's familiar. And honestly, I think there's moms listening right now who cannot remember the last time that they truly rested mentally. Not just sitting down physically for the 1 or 2 minutes you get to, and we're calling that rest every day, but actually resting emotionally. Actually feeling safe enough to exhale. Actually feeling like someone else was carrying things for a moment. Physical exhaustion is one thing. Emotional exhaustion is completely different. It makes everything feel heavier. Small tasks will feel completely overwhelming. Patience becomes so hard, and motivation will decrease faster than the snacks you bought for your kiddos. You can feel emotionally numb one day and overly emotional the next. You can be irritable, forgetful, disconnected, not because you're failing, but because your nervous system has been under pressure too long. And mothers experience this constantly, especially mothers who feel like they have to hold it together all the time. Because many of us silently believe, if I fall apart, everything else will too. So we keep going. We keep pushing, no matter how tired we are, no matter how depleted we feel, no matter how desperately we need support. And I think that's why so many mothers feel emotionally lonely, even inside loving families. Because being surrounded by people does not automatically mean you're emotionally supported. You can be deeply loved and still feel unseen. You can have people around you constantly and still feel emotionally alone in what you carry, especially when nobody realizes how much pressure you are under mentally. And mental load is difficult to explain to people who don't carry it. It's not just doing tasks, it's being responsible for remembering the task, planning the task, anticipating the problems before they happen, and keeping everyone else's lives running smoothly behind the scenes. And honestly, that level of constant mental responsibility can become suffocating, especially when there's little relief, little appreciation, little emotional care being poured back into you. And I think one of the main reasons Mother's Day matters emotionally to moms is because deep down, we long to feel poured into, not just needed or depended on, not just useful. We want to feel loved, cared for, considered, thought about. And there's nothing selfish about wanting that. Nothing. Mothers are people too. Women with emotions, with fears, with dreams, and sometimes we feel overwhelmed. And I think motherhood can slowly consume a woman's identity if we're not careful. After years of caregiving, many moms stop recognizing ourselves or themselves outside of responsibility. We become mom to everyone else, but we quietly lose connections with ourselves. Personally, our hobbies disappear, our rest disappears, our individuality disappears, and eventually, you may realize that you've spent years surviving without nurturing yourself at all. And that realization can be painful. But again, you're not alone, not even close. Because many mothers silently grieve versions of ourselves that we no longer recognize. Not because we regret motherhood, but because we've neglected ourselves far too long while trying to care for everyone else. And the hard truth is, you cannot continuously abandon yourself emotionally and expect to feel whole. At some point, you need care too. You need kindness too. You need support. And I know some mothers struggle even hearing that because they've been conditioned to believe that constantly sacrificing themselves completely is what makes them good. But you're destroying yourself? That is not a requirement for loving your family well. You are allowed to exist as a whole person too. You're allowed to have limits, need rest. You are allowed to need help. And you're allowed to have emotions outside of gratitude and patience. And honestly, I think some moms need permission to stop pretending they're okay when they're not. Because silence can become dangerous. Not physically, not always, but emotional, spiritual, mental. When you continuously Suppress your exhaustion, hurt, loneliness, resentment, disappointment, and the feeling of being overwhelmed. Those emotions, they're going to surface somewhere. Could be through irritability or numbness or anxiety or through a complete emotional shutdown. Possibly through tears that seem to come out of nowhere. And sometimes, most times, moms feel guilty for reaching those emotional limits. But limits are human. Even strong people have limits, especially strong people. And maybe strength isn't always about continuing to carry everything silent. Maybe strength is finally admitting, this is heavy. Maybe strength is asking for support. Maybe strength is resting before the burnout instead of collapsing afterwards. Maybe strength is learning that your needs matter too, because they do. They absolutely do. And I know that there are mothers listening who have spent years believing their needs should always come last. That constantly living last in your own life eventually hurts something inside of you. Maybe not immediately, but slowly. Until one day you realize you've disappeared underneath responsibility. And I don't think God ever intended motherhood to erase women completely. I think motherhood is meant to shape you, not consume you entirely. And maybe part of healing after Mother's Day is recognizing that you deserve ongoing care, not just an annual appreciation. But this annual appreciation day, it's not always a celebration for everyone. For some women, Mother's Day feels heavy from the moment you wake up. And while the world is posting flowers and happy family pictures, you're just trying to survive the day emotionally. Maybe this was your first Mother's Day without your mom. And grief has a strange way of making holidays feel louder. You notice the absence more, the silence more, the ache more. You remember the phone calls you can't make, the advice you wish you could still ask for, the voice you wish you could hear one more time. And sometimes grief, it shows up unexpectedly in grocery store aisles, old photographs, songs, recipes, the smell of coffee in the morning. Those memories that hit your heart before your mind has time to prepare. And Mother's Day can intensify all of that because grief and love are deeply connected. The deeper the love, the deeper the ache when someone is gone. So, if you cried this Mother's Day, if your heart felt heavy, if you smiled publicly while grieving quietly, I just want you to know that your grief deserves gentleness, not pressure, not timelines, and not expectations. Gentleness. And I want to speak to the mothers who are grieving children because I know how unbearable holidays can feel when someone important is missing. Maybe you've experienced miscarriage or infant loss or a different kind of loss. Maybe it's estrangement. Maybe you've become a mother through loss before you ever got to hold a baby in your arms. And sometimes society doesn't fully acknowledge those forms of motherhood, but they matter. Your love mattered. Your child mattered. Your grief matters. And I think some women spend Mother's Day feeling invisible because their motherhood doesn't fit the version people publicly celebrate. But motherhood is bigger than photos. It's bigger than tradition or appearances. Love still counts, even when loss exists beside it. And to the women struggling with infertility, my heart truly goes out to you, because Mother's Day can feel painfully isolating, especially when it seems like everyone around you is celebrating something that you have been praying for. And people sometimes say insensitive things without realizing how deeply those words can cut and hurt. Just relax. It'll happen eventually. At least you can sleep in, as if deep longing can be fixed by casual comments, as if grief disappears because people don't see it. Silent grief is still grief. Unspoken heartbreak is still heartbreak. And if Mother's Day left you feeling emotionally raw, you are not weak for that. You are human. I think one of the hardest things about emotional pain is feeling like everyone else moved on while you're still carrying it. But please remember that healing is not a race, and your pain is not less valid because it is invisible to other people. I also want to speak to the single mothers for a moment, because I think many single moms carry levels of exhaustion most people can't fully understand. Doing everything alone, making every decision alone, carrying the financial pressure, the emotional pressure, physical exhaustion, trying to stay strong for a child while privately wondering how much longer you can keep carrying so much. And many single mothers don't even have the luxury of falling apart, because survival requires constant functioning. So they keep pushing, keep sacrificing, keep figuring things out somehow. I hope single mothers know this. Just because you carry it well doesn't mean it isn't heavy. And your strength deserves recognition too, not just on holidays, every day. Because all mothers are performing miracles quietly. We're stretching ourselves beyond what feels impossible and still loving deeply through all of it. And that matters more than words can fully express. I also know that there are mothers who feel lonely inside a marriage. And people don't talk about that enough either. Because loneliness doesn't only happen when you're physically alone. Sometimes it happens when your emotional needs go unseen for far too long. Communication fades. The connection weakens. You've become co-workers managing life instead of partners supporting each other deeply. Roommates. And Mother's Day can sometimes magnify that emotional distance, because part of you hopes maybe today is the day that I'll feel emotionally cared for. And then when that longing isn't met, it hurts, especially if you already feel emotionally exhausted. And I think many women quietly carry sadness over how much of themselves they've poured into others without feeling poured into themselves. Not because we expect perfection, but because everyone longs for emotional connection. Everyone longs to feel cherished, not just useful, cherished. And there's a difference. Because being useful means people value what you do. Being cherished means people value who you are. And many mothers spend years being useful while quietly longing to feel emotionally treasured too. I think there are moms listening who have become so used to surviving that they forgot that they deserve joy too. Not just survival, joy, peace, laughter, rest, gentleness, presence. Maybe Mother's Day reminded you of what's missing emotionally in your life. Not because you're ungrateful, but because your heart is trying to tell you something. And instead of shaming yourself for those feelings, maybe listen compassionately, because ignored emotions do not disappear. They just settle deeper. One of the bravest things a mother can do is admit when her heart is tired. Not because she's weak, but because, honestly, it's often the beginning of healing. Maybe you've spent years carrying pain quietly because you didn't want to burden anyone else. But you matter too much to keep disappearing. Your heart matters too. Your mental health matters. Your emotional well-being matters. And if nobody reminded you of that recently, let this episode remind you now. You are more than what you provide for others. You are more than what you accomplish. You are more than how well you hold everything together. You are worthy. And I truly believe that some mothers need to stop waiting for permission to matter, because you already matter. Not because you've earned it through exhaustion, not because you've sacrificed enough, not because you held everything together perfectly. You matter because your life carries value inherently. And I know for many moms, that is very difficult to believe fully, especially after years of neglecting themselves emotionally. But healing often begins with those small moments of truth, small moments where you stop dismissing your own needs, small moments where you stop minimizing your exhaustion, small moments where you finally acknowledge, I need care too. And maybe that acknowledgement feels uncomfortable at first, but uncomfortable does not mean wrong. Sometimes healing feels unfamiliar because survival became familiar. Maybe there are mothers listening who have survived for so long that they barely remember what emotional peace feels like anymore. But it is still possible. Not perfect circumstances or families, not perfect emotions every day, but moments of peace inside imperfect lives. You deserve those moments too. You are more than what you do. One of the quietest and craziest struggles that we carry is feeling like our worth is connected to how much we accomplish, how much we clean, how much we organize, how much we provide, how much we can manage, or worse, how much we sacrifice. And because motherhood involves constant responsibility, it's very easy for us to slowly begin measuring ourselves only by productivity. Did I get enough done today? Was the house clean enough? Was I patient enough? Did I forget anything? Did I fail somewhere? And when the answer feels imperfect, many moms immediately turn against ourselves. And the self-criticism starts. The guilt starts. The overthinking starts. And honestly, some mothers speak to ourselves with a level of rudeness, harshness, and craziness that we would never use towards anyone else that we love. We've talked about that before. I think that comes from pressure. Pressure from culture, comparison, unrealistic expectations, from trying to be everything for everyone all the time. Constantly nurturing others while neglecting yourself that's not how we're supposed to live. We're not machines, but many of us live exactly like that and have for many years. Giving, pouring, sacrificing, carrying, until eventually you barely recognize yourself anymore. Because somewhere along the way, we have stopped existing as a person and started existing as a role. A role can become consuming if we're not careful. Because motherhood is a part of who you are, but it is not entirely who you are. You're still a woman. You're still a person. And you still have emotions, creativity, thoughts, dreams, and needs too. Many of us quietly mourn the parts of ourselves that we lost while surviving. Not because we resent motherhood, but because those parts of us have disappeared. And I'm sure we've all had those moments where we look in the mirror and think, I don't even know who I am anymore. That feeling is way more common than people would like to admit. Because when your entire life revolves around caring for others, it's very easy to lose connection with yourself, even when there's little space for reflection, especially when there's little space for reflection, little space for rest, personal joy. We're not supposed to feel guilty for wanting more than survival, for wanting peace or support or rest, for wanting emotional connection. We are allowed to be cared for too. I think some mothers have spent so long in survival mode that they don't even know what they enjoy anymore because everything has become an obligation. Responsibilities, schedules, tasks, needs, demands. And somewhere in the middle of constantly responding to everyone else, their own little world became quiet, neglected, ignored. But you matter outside of what you do for other people. That truth is important because if your worth only comes from productivity, you will always feel like you haven't done enough. Endless giving without care creates emptiness, and empty people struggle to keep pouring. Not because they don't love deeply, but because depletion affects the human heart. That's why rest matters physically too, spiritually too. Rest reminds you that your value is not dependent on constant performance, that your existence matters even when you're not producing something, that you are loved even in unfinished seasons. And I think God sees mothers differently than the world does. The world celebrates visible success, visible achievement, visible perfection. But God notices hidden faithfulness, the quiet sacrifices, the unseen prayers, the moments when there's no applause, the tears that we've cried privately, the strength it took to keep going when nobody realized how tired we were. And maybe some mothers need to hear this today. Your ordinary faithfulness matters deeply, even when nobody praises it, even when nobody notices it fully, even when it feels repetitive. There is dignity in loving people consistently. There is beauty in showing up repeatedly. And there is strength in continuing to care through exhaustion. And I think many mothers underestimate the impact they're having because their work feels so ordinary. But ordinary moments shape lives. The bedtime talks, the car rides, those big comforting hugs, the prayers we've whispered over our children, the consistency, the presence. That's the kind of love people remember forever. Not perfection, presence. And maybe that's why the days after motherhood matter so much emotionally. Because once the celebration fades, mothers return to ordinary work again. The hidden work, the repetitive work, the unnoticed work. And I want to say this clearly. That work still matters immensely, even on Tuesday morning, even when nobody says thank you, even when nobody notices how much energy it took for you to keep showing up. You matter beyond holidays, beyond celebrations, beyond recognition. And maybe today, instead of measuring your worth by what you have accomplished this week, you simply allow yourself to acknowledge how much you've already carried, how much strength it took to just keep going, how many silent battles you fought privately, and how many times you've showed up despite exhaustion. That deserves compassion, not criticism. So maybe this week, you stop demanding perfection from yourself. Maybe you let yourself breathe a little. Maybe you stop apologizing for being tired. Maybe you stop feeling guilty for needing rest. Maybe you stop measuring yourself against impossible standards, because perfection has never been the goal. Love is. And if you are loving your family while also trying to learn, grow, heal, and keep going, you are already doing way more than you realize. As we start wrapping up our conversation today, I want to sit here for a moment with every mother listening. The exhausted moms, the grieving moms, the overwhelmed moms, the lonely moms, the single moms, the stay-at-home moms, the working moms, the moms who feel unseen, the moms who are trying their best while quietly wondering if their best is enough. I hope that somewhere in this episode, you have felt understood, not judged, not pressured, not compared, understood, and seen. Because motherhood carries so many emotions that people rarely talk about honestly. And I think many mothers are carrying far more than others realize, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So if Mother's Day left you feeling celebrated, I'm grateful for that. Truly. I hope you felt loved deeply. But if Mother's Day left you feeling disappointed, empty, overlooked, or emotionally heavy, I hope that you know your worth did not change because of one difficult day. One holiday does not determine your value. One moment does not define your motherhood. You are still important on ordinary days, still valued, still valuable on the hard days, and you are still deeply needed and deeply loved even when nobody says it perfectly. And honestly, I think some of us are waiting for external validation to finally believe we matter. Waiting for someone to say the perfect words, for enough appreciation, enough recognition. But your value existed long before anyone acknowledged it, and it will continue existing even when people fail to express it well. Your worth is not fragile. It's not dependent on applause or productivity. And it's definitely not dependent on perfection. I know motherhood can sometimes make women feel invisible, especially when so much of the work happens quietly behind the scenes. But invisible does not mean insignificant. Please don't confuse the two. Some of the most important work in this world happens quietly, slowly, repetitively, without attention and without recognition. And motherhood, that's exactly that kind of work. Sacred work, quiet work, heart-shaping work, life-changing work. Even when it feels ordinary, even when it feels exhausting, even when it feels unseen. And maybe today, instead of focusing on everything you think you're not doing well, you simply acknowledge this. You've kept going. You've loved through exhaustion. You've carried responsibilities that stretched you emotionally. You've shown up on days you wanted to collapse. And you've continued trying, even in moments of self-doubt. That matters way more than you realize. And maybe grace for this season looks less like perfection and more like gentleness. Gentleness towards yourself, your limits, towards the version of you that is still learning, still healing, still growing. Mothers need grace too, not just grit. And I think that's something this community will always make space for. Not just the strength, but the softness too. Not just the endurance, but the rest too. Not just the surviving, but healing. And maybe after Mother's Day, what many mothers truly need most is not another performance, not more pressure, just permission to breathe again and rest without guilt. Permission to stop carrying the impossible expectations. Permission to remember that they are human beings too. And if nobody reminded you this week, let me remind you now. You're not falling behind because you're tired. You're not weak because you need support. You're not less valued because motherhood feels hard sometimes. You do not need to earn the right to matter. You already do, right now, exactly where you are. So, as you move through the days after Mother's Day, through the routines, the dishes, the responsibilities, the pickups, the work schedules, the emotional labor, I hope you carry this truth with you. Your life matters deeply. Your presence matters deeply. Your love matters deeply. Even when the world moves on quickly after the holiday ends, even when nobody claps for ordinary moments, even when the work feels repetitive, the seeds you plant through love, consistency, and care are shaping lives every single day. Never underestimate that. Never underestimate yourself. Before we close today, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to every mother who continues to show up despite exhaustion. Thank you to the mothers who are carrying invisible grief. Thank you to the mothers trying to break unhealthy cycles. Thank you to the mothers who keep loving even when life feels overwhelming. Thank you to the mothers doing quiet work nobody fully sees. You matter here. You're appreciated here. And I hope this conversation gave your heart a little room to exhale. Thank you for spending this time with me and sharing this space with me. If today's episode encouraged you, reminded you that you're not alone, or gave you something you needed emotionally, I hope that you'll carry that with you through the rest of this week. Please be gentle with yourself and take care of your heart too. And remember, grace and grit can exist together. I'll see you guys next time.
There